James Demmert, founder and chief investment officer, Main Street Research, is with me. And look, we have had, I think we're up to almost 30 records for the S&P 500, but forget the number. The point is what an incredible run we've had. And people say, you know, is it going to fizzle out? Hasn't fizzled yet. What are your thoughts?
Well, you can see how it's opening today. You know, tech stocks just making new highs. It is a very narrow market. If you're not in tech, you know, you kind of can be in financials, maybe the electricity efficiency trade, but tech continues to be the winner. I think it's fueled, Nicole, by this excess cash that's still out there. A lot of investors are not fully invested. Sentiment isn't entirely bullish. So, you know, in the wake of no other news this week about earnings, and also the, of course, the AI, a big move. This is why.
And look, a government shutdown not affecting the markets at this moment. You know, whether it takes time or GDP pulls back or something. I mean, that's a sort of a long-term story if that in fact happens. Right now, it doesn't appear that way at this moment. In the meantime, pullbacks, you're buying. What are you buying on pullbacks?
Yeah, I think that investors should expect a pullback. We haven't had a 6, 7, 8% pullback in, since April, this big, huge rally. And I would suggest investors, and there's a lot of them that aren't fully invested, buy that dip. And I think what works in the United States is very clearly the AI trade. That means technology, telecom. There's a huge bull market in financial stocks because of deregulation. So that means the JP Morgans and the Visas. And I think that we need to build a larger electrical grid is obvious with all the technology. So companies like GE Vernova, great place to buy that dip.
Yeah, I want to go over some of those names again, but let's talk about your target. I mean, you think that the S&P could even get to 7,000 sooner than later. What kind of time period are you talking?
Yeah, we're at 7,100 by the end of the year.
7,100 by the end of the year.
That's another 6% from here.
Okay, well that is actually, and then what about next year?
We're at 8,100.
And what's going to drive that?
You know, I think in the United States, what drives it is it's going to continue to be the AI trade. You know, there is more capital investment coming towards building out AI in this big revolution. I think it's also going to happen in the financial stocks, the electrical grid stocks. But I think, like many investors, we are very hopeful that this market will finally start to broaden out in 2026 and include all these other sectors that, frankly speaking, have been neglected.
I mean, when you look at 7,100, 8,100 next year, I mean, I know you have this. By the way, I wear a Dow 40,000 hat. You know, do we get to 100,000 on the Dow in our lifetime, or when does this happen?
It's a great question. Is it in our lifetime? When is it? We've done a lot of work on this. Dow 100,000, you know, we look at this economic cycle. We think we're the second year in. Cycles last 6 or 7, 8 years. So we're looking out over 5 years, looking at price earnings multiples and the productivity gains from AI, which are going to be significant. And that's when we attach to the indexes a multiple that we think is reasonable, and that's how we get to Dow 100,000 in the next 5 to 6 years. NASDAQ 50,000, which I think will be a stunner. But of course, there's going to be bumps along the way. It could be derailed by all kinds of things, but we're sticking to Dow 100 for the 5, 6 years.
That's pretty amazing. That is in my lifetime, I'm glad to say. When you talk about names that you liked, you mentioned GE Vernova. What kind of upside do you see for that kind of name?
You know, GE Vernova has been a wonderful stock this year. It's performed extremely well. And people think, like they did with NVIDIA, that it's overpriced. And what happens every time they report, the earnings continue to exceed expectations. And we think that same performance can occur over the next 12 months. Now, they're growing at around 30% a year. So if we attach that to the multiple, which right now is less than that, we think we can probably see that type of return, 25 to 30% return in that whole space of expanding the electrical grid.
What's the New World Order? What does that mean?
Well, the New World Order, the way we view it, is the Trump administration has made some significant economic changes that we haven't seen in decades. Instead of spending more fiscal money than we have, we're going to try to restrain it, and that's why the government's shut down. That's going to create some headwinds for the U.S., right? That's a new world order. We haven't had that. We're also creating an economy now that's very much staying at home. We don't want to. We want to charge people tariffs, right? Want to bring everything back to the U.S. So we've closed the open trade. These are very significant economic changes, and it's probably going to create some headwinds for economic growth in the U.S. But at the same time, as we've talked before, it creates wonderful opportunities for foreign markets, which are going to have to do the opposite.
Well, I always say Mag 7 plus Broadcom. Tell me why that is definitely a winner in your eyes.
Yeah, Broadcom should be part of the Mag 8, I guess we should call it.
Yeah.
And that's because they make specialized AI chips for companies that need to go a little bit further in a more tailored technology. You know, like many of these technological revolutions, in the beginning you have the basic chips that can drive it, which is what NVIDIA is providing for us. And Broadcom brings it to a whole nother level with very high profit margins.
And you mentioned JP Morgan, but I'll move on and talk about some of the foreign names that you had. You had Siemens, HSBC, and Taiwan Semi.
Yeah, those foreign markets are trading at half the multiple of the U.S. Right here, we're trading at 23 times earnings. Foreign markets at 15 times earnings. HSBC, the largest bank in Europe, also going through a restructuring, trading at 12 times earnings. Really appealing here. Siemens Energy, very much a cousin to GE Vernova, helping us build out the electrical grid. And Taiwan Semi, we think is a really important theme in this whole AI revolution.
James, great to see you. Always, James Demmert, founder, chief investment officer at Main Street Research. Thank you so much. And we'll watch for some of those targets.